Welcome to the Old Glory Renovations Podcast, the podcast about home renovations from the home renovations experts. Hosted by Rob Hefner and Mike Landry. The Old Glory Renovations Podcast wants to show you how to enjoy your home renovations.
Rob's show taught me a lot.
Choosing the right contractor for the job doesn't have to be scary, and home renovations are built to enjoy and be fun.
I got so much more for my money.
Now, here are your hosts for the Old Glory Renovation Podcast, Rob Hefner and Mike Landry.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Old Glory Renovations. Next podcast, we're going to be talking with Rob Hefner and myself, Mike Landry, today. What's happening, Rob?
We're having a beautiful day out here today. I hope you are too.
Finally, the holidays are over. It's time to get the renovations kicked back in.
It's time to get back to work.
Mama should be happy, so now it's time to beautify the house. Today, we're going to be talking about something I find very interesting because this is becoming more and more of an issue. ADA compliant and ADA accessible modifications for both commercial and residential properties.
Well, I have been involved with some of this. I didn't necessarily set out to get into it. We are working on a contract to convert a home into a extended care facility. And I went and looked at another one earlier this week about doing the same thing. In the meantime, we've done a couple of jobs where we're trying to get the home more accessible for someone who's confined to a wheelchair. And there's enough of it coming up right now. I thought it'd be a great topic for a podcast today.
Yeah, the issues are you have some. There are obviously a lot of people that were injured during the wars, and then you have tens of thousands of people that were already burdened with disabilities, which minimize their ability to interact in a conventional house. And we're going to talk about the limitations of those homes, whether they're buying or renting a new property, or whether they're moving into a facility with their families that need to have some enhancements, some changes so that they can function normally in that space independently. So let's talk about, let's take an example in a residential property. Let's say you've got one of these older homes that was built back in the 70s or the 60s. You know, it's maybe 1,500 square feet, 1,200 square feet, whatever. Walk me through somebody that is in a wheelchair. What are the things that need to be adjusted and modified to accommodate that person's disability?
Well, it all starts with accessibility and independence. In other words, we if we're going to modify an existing home, we want to modify it in such a way that someone who is confined to a wheelchair can go where they need to go, can live in the house comfortably, access every room, and do all of those things. So it starts with getting into the home. The easy way to do it. We start in the front door, getting the right kind of a ramp at the right angle so that you can get into the house on your own, because it's about independence, what we're trying to achieve here, not just accessibility, but independence.
Okay, so let's talk about that. The average front door is going to be one of two sizes, a 2-foot 8-inch door or a 3-foot wide door.
Right, and
a lot of those older homes had 2-foot 8 doors.
That is correct, and for a wheelchair to get through comfortably, you can squeeze through a 2-8 door, but you know you're going to lose some hair off the back of your knuckles doing so. So to get through comfortably, it's changing out that front door to a 3-foot, making sure that it opens the right way. Some doors open in, some doors open out. Well, if you're in a wheelchair and it opens out, it's hard to go up the ramp, open the door, and then it comes back towards you. Well, that's not cool. So changing it to an interior swing door so that you can get to the door, open it, and push it in, and then close it behind you once you're inside the house, instead of having to work your way around it.
So would you, if asked, would you recommend to widen that door to a 3-foot?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Throughout the home, as we enter the home and you're in the hallway and you have bedrooms on either side, for example, the doors into the bedrooms need to be 3-foot wide as well, just to allow a chair to move in and out easily.
Right.
Now, for some spaces, it can get tight inside the room. It may be a small bedroom or something like that just gets kind of tight. And going through the door in a chair, opening it out into the hallway or into the bedroom, and then having to do that little dance, to get the chair out of the way and then lean over and close the door behind you. One thing that I've seen in a couple of homes recently is installing sliding doors, either pocket doors or a barn door style, just depending on the aesthetic of the home.
That is much more functional.
It is, because that way you can access the door, pull it open, roll through it, and lean back and pull it shut behind you without having to do all that kabuki dance.
Well, the barn doors have been super popular and super trendy for the last, I'd say 6-7 years.
I did see one home. I didn't install it. I wish I had, where they had remote activated doors.
Really?
So he had a remote on his chair. He'd push a button and the door would open. He'd push a button, the door would close.
That's pretty cool.
So he could go anywhere he wanted in the house quickly and easily without a lot of chaos and without a lot of drama.
Well, and it may sound like this is major construction, and it's really not, because when you have you've got a pre-built door frame that fits in an opening that is built much wider to accommodate that, and when you remove that door, all you have to do is case the opening.
Right. Now, unfortunately, they don't make door stretchers. I wish they did, just so we could just clamp it on there and widen it up. Widening a door, think about the lumber in there inside that wall. We have to redesign that, take it out, and put it back in order to get that door to the 3-foot width.
Right.
So it's not a minor job. A lot of times what we struggle with the most is matching the tile on the floor, because when we widen the door, we're going to have a gap on either side where there's no tile. And matching that tile is always a challenge.
Do you find that obviously hard surfaces are going to be much more conducive to wheelchair?
Well, let's talk about
functions.
hard surfaces for a minute. A hard surface to maneuver on top of is always a good thing. It's easier to maneuver, easier to turn, easier to do everything on a hard surface. LVP works very well for that. Tile has the grout lines in it that gives you a little bit of a bumpy ride. So I see a lot of ADA compliant homes that opt for a continuous hard surface, like a synthetic wood, LVP, something like that, just to make it smooth as glass all the way around. At the same time, on an older home, the hallways aren't always wide enough, especially if it's an automated chair. There's just not a whole lot of room in there.
Right.
And you see a lot of damage on the walls and that kind of thing.
Well, my mother-in-law was a big woman, and she was in a wheelchair, or one of those powered chairs, for close to 7-8 years before she passed away. But she definitely looked like she was playing bumper cars in there.
Well, but putting a solid surface on that wall, just as a chair rail, 4 feet, it just looks like a regular chair rail in a kitchen area, or
a trim,
like that.
Just a trim detail.
But putting that on there can help protect the wall, make it easier to maneuver, so the person who is in the chair doesn't have to worry about hitting the wall. It's not going to mark it.
Right. It's not going to damage the sheetrock. It's kind of like a border.
right.
Or a temporary wall that'll keep you from your bumper car getting into the wall.
It's just something that if you hit it, it's not going to be a big deal. Both of us have a little bit of experience on boats. Boats are going to hit things. Chairs are going to hit things, especially in confined spaces. It's not a big deal. You got to plan for it and prepare for it, and ensure that it doesn't affect the appearance of the home overall. So putting that up on the walls can help make those hallways more easily accessible and give the individual who's in the chair more freedom in moving around and more liberty in doing what he wants to do or she wants to do.
Now, obviously, there are degrees of complexity and design that can be incorporated.
Oh, my goodness.
Depending on how much you want to spend or how little you have to spend. We're talking about the basic essentials to accommodate somebody in a wheelchair. Now, you can go, I've seen suspended railing systems and all kinds of things in homes for people that have extreme disabilities, but we're talking about the average person in a wheelchair that has limited
Limited mobility.
Mobility, yeah, that's the word I was looking for. So, so that addresses getting into the house. And you're going to have to create some kind of on the entry. You're going to have to create some kind of system so that you can get up to the front door.
Right. So build a ramp to get up to the front door, and depending on what's there, it may be a concrete ramp, it may be something else. There are pre-made ramps that are very good quality, and not insanely expensive either.
I saw one the other day.
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways to deal with that. You mentioned the complexity and all the pieces, parts of it. Let's talk about that for just a minute. ADA accessible is one thing. That means that you or your loved one is in a chair and they need to figure out what they need to do in order to do what they want to do for them. That may just be widening a few doors. That may be any number of things. ADA compliant, there's a whole separate set of code for ADA compliant. That means there's a third-party inspector. An engineer designs exactly what has to be done. And that gets into some very extensive detail. Lowering the sinks, for example, so that and ensuring that it's not a solid cabinet underneath, that the chair can roll underneath the sink and still be able to reach the back of it, the depth of the sink itself. Because if you're sitting in a chair having to reach over the top of a countertop 42 inches high or 43 inches high by the time you put granite on it, you can't reach the bottom of the sink.
Right.
So, especially for some of the deep ones. So designing it so that the countertops are lower and that the sinks are shallower and that the faucet is more easily accessible from the outside, all designed and all intended to give somebody who's in a chair that freedom of mobility, that independence that we all want.
Yeah, and again, when you say compliant, that's a technical term for a commercial type application where ADA compliance is required to meet code standards. But those standards that are developed for those commercial properties are being utilized as a guideline in the ADA accessible designs that you're providing to residential properties.
Right.
So that those standards have already been tested and trued and they're very functional. They work, right?
Well, these two jobs I'm working on now that are both ADA compliant. They're both residential homes that are either being expanded or being converted to be extended care facilities. And in those, every detail to make the facility accessible and user-friendly for someone in a chair. It includes the height of the light switches, the height of the plugs on the walls, the size of the cabinets, placement of the cabinets, depth of the sink, style of the water faucets, width of the hallway. There's 1,000 details go into it, and on a commercial facility, all of those details are inspected. Now, I'm not an expert on all of those details, which is why I won't touch one of those unless there's an engineer giving me a blueprint that shows me exactly what has to be done.
Exactly. And so when you think about a residential property, regardless of the size, and let's say you have a mother-in-law or a father-in-law or mom and dad that are now restricted to wheelchair access, and you're trying to modify your home to accommodate them, they need access to a bedroom. They need access to get into the house and get to the kitchen and get to a family room where they can share access and family time. The modifications, if needed, if they were on their own and they bought this house and they needed to make these modifications to accommodate their particular lifestyle and they're still independent, these things also have to be considered. So if you're living with your family, you may not have to reduce drop the kitchen sinks and open up the bottom so that you can get in there and do dishes, right? The light switches probably don't need to be dropped in that case, except in the areas where they're independent on their own. But again, if you're going in on your own and you are the only person living in this house, then let's talk about some of the other things like the bathrooms need modification or a bathroom needs modification. Let's talk about the circumstances there.
Well, bathrooms are rather complex. when it comes to this sort of thing. First off, as you go through the door into the bathroom, there needs to be a 5-foot square space, 5-foot radius space, actually, that you can take the chair in and turn it around if you need to. Creating that space in a bathroom, we did one a couple of months ago where we just had to remove a set of cabinets to create that kind of space.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in addition to that, the style of the toilet needs to be a little bit higher to make it easier to get from the chair onto the toilet when necessary.
I never thought about that. That's interesting.
Yeah, the height of the toilet and all that kind of stuff. Now, roll-in showers are another piece of that component, because remember, the whole thing is about independence. If it's an existing home and you're doing this for a loved one, or some of the veterans that I work with, which is most of what I've done it for, and you're doing it for somebody you care about, first thing is to understand how they want to live their life in that home, and then make those modifications or suggest those modifications that will allow them to do so without completely redesigning the home. A roll-in shower is a big part of it. And of course, with a roll-in shower, you have to worry about drainage. You don't want to get water all over the floor and everything like that. But you got to worry about drainage. You got to worry about room inside the shower and a bench, maybe a fold-down bench, maybe a wall bench or something like that, so that someone can get out of the chair and sit on the bench. Or, they have one of my veterans I worked with recently, he had a separate chair for the shower, and he showered in the chair. But he could do it on his own. That's the whole focus of it, is providing that level of independence. Look at the height of the shower head and the shower wand, how you lay hands on that, how you lay hands on the water temperature control.
The heights of those will be changed to accommodate the uniqueness. And around the toilet, just like you see in commercial bathrooms at restaurants and stuff, the grab bars are going to be surrounding that so that you have the ability to utilize those to stabilize yourself. In the shower, you have the same thing.
In the shower, you have the same thing. Well, there's grab bars in a lot of different places because they're handy to have. When you get into the shower, having grab bars on the wall that are placed appropriately to facilitate getting out of the chair, if that's what you want to do, or whatever it happens to be. But that's why on these residential remodels for ADA accessible, the first thing is to sit down with the family and to sit down with the loved one and say, okay, how do you want to live in this house? What do we need to do to make this? What do you need to do in order to make this house an environment where this individual is completely independent and he can do what he wants to do?
Now, I will tell you one thing that is a recent evolution that works great. Okay, the Alexa.
Yeah.
Okay, you just swipe out the light bulbs and you can tell Alexa, turn on the lights, set 50% lighting, and it'll do it automatically.
Well, there was a time that living independently on your own in a wheelchair in a home by yourself was just almost not doable. That time is behind us.
Way behind us.
Way behind us. There's so many modifications that can be done, and we're not talking huge cost factors either. There's so many modifications that can be done and specialized for that individual. Position of the grab bars in the shower. One guy wants them a little higher, one a little bit lower.
Right.
That's okay. We can accommodate that.
That's the difference between ADA accessible and ADA compliant, because ADA compliant has a hard, rigid 36 inches off the ground on center, and you can't have it above it or below it. It's got to be exactly there. But with your program of ADA accessible, there are no standards that we have to follow. There are guidelines that said we typically put it at 36, but if you want it at 28, we'll put it at 28.
Well, and that goes to customizing the home to make it accessible and to provide that independence. There's a lot of different things that go into achieving that kind of independence. Some folks that have been confined to a chair for a long time don't even recognize what is possible.
Well, I will tell you this: one of the biggest values that you bring across the board in renovations is that you're willing to do small projects. So these types of modifications may only require you coming in and doing the modifications to the bathroom, right? The little bathroom, right?
Right.
And 99% of remodeling contractors, they either do handyman jobs or they do remodeling. And if they're doing remodeling, they want $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 projects. So they're going to shy away from this stuff. And the handyman is going to knock your head off because he's charging you a lot for every little thing that he does, and won't have the talent to deliver a fully remodeled bathroom to your satisfaction.
There are some great handymen out there, but you're right, because of the way they function in that business model. Pricing is different. Now, I'm not currently configured where I can get into things like relighting a hot water heater, some of the simple handyman jobs that come up. But replacing a door, that kind of stuff, we can do that. And part of doing that is the way the company was founded and what we're all about. We want to make a difference in our community.
Well, I'll tell you, the reason that a handyman is not capable of producing a satisfactory result is because he's geared to make simple repairs. He's not designed to remodel a bathroom, okay, where you're touching tile, you're touching wall structures, you're touching trim items, you're painting. I mean, there are no jack of all trades and masters of all. They don't exist, okay?
Masters of all
don't be
exist.
sold that bill, because it's not happening. It's going to look like a repair guy came in and patched your room.
Well, I don't mind those smaller jobs like that. I actually kind of like making a home accessible to somebody, and because of the impact it has on the individual and on his family.
This is the only company that I know of, and I've been a builder for 22 years, that will accommodate and try to attract that type of business, because what happens is that these projects don't carry huge budgets, and they require a meticulous detail, and it's a lot of, you're touching a lot of things, so you have to protect everything, and which is why the remodelers want big numbers so that they can make great margins and to deal with all the hassle, right? And you're dealing with at least 4 to 7 disciplines that have to be involved to finish the job and make it look like it's something that you're proud of. So you're a good sized company, and that's just the way you designed it, because you not only want bigger projects, but the small ones grow sometimes into, I do a little project and then a bigger project comes on later, but it's also in reverse. So you do a big project, and then they say, oh, our doors are squeaking and they're not closing. So now 6 months or a year down the road, that they need you to come do a little project. So you're facilitating a lifelong partnership with them, regardless of the size of their needs.
Success in construction is about reputation. It's about referrals. It's about doing such a great job for homeowner A that he tells homeowner B, C, D, and E that we're the right company to hire. And what I'm talking about on helping people design and come up with good answers for ADA compliance has, quite honestly, it doesn't have a great deal to do with marketing. Sure, there are benefits there. I'm not arguing that. But what it really has to do with is that influence, I like leaving my customers happy. And when somebody that struggled to take a bath, that struggled to get in and out of the doors, can just roll right through it, no pun intended, he could just roll right through it, and it makes his life so much easier. It makes his loved ones' lives easier, and that's making a difference.
Well, I got to tell you, this is an incredible topic. It impacts a lot of people these days.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just don't want you guys to feel like this is an insurmountable task because it requires huge budgets. It does not. And you've got a company that is very happy to accommodate small budgets and do an incredible job. Rob, thanks for your time, brother.
All right, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
We're going to run out to a break, guys. Hang with us. It's Old Glory Renovations podcast. You can find information online at oldglorytx.com, or you can call them at
281-546-8836. That's my cell phone. If I don't answer, I will call you back as soon as I can.
Call us at 281-546-8836. 281-546-8836. Located in Seabrook, Texas, but service most of the greater Houston area south of downtown.
That's all for this week's Old Glory Renovations podcast. Tune in next week when Mike and Rob help you enjoy your renovations. Find out more at oldglorytx.com. Old Glory Renovations revolutionized the industry to put the customer in total control. There's little to no deposit to begin work, weekly invoicing only on completed work, weekly itemized labor and material cost for invoicing, eliminating wasting your money with overpriced turnkey estimates. Their trade labor are on staff and not subcontractors. They don't leave projects sitting dormant for days or weeks or waiting on a subcontractor. They have proper general liability insurance coverage. Call Old Glory Renovations now and take control while maximizing your buying power. Old Glory, trust, honesty, confidence. Taking the fear out of home improvement. 281-546-8836 or online at oldglorytx.com.